My name is Rodrigo Barretto. I'm a software engineer for Attido, and in this short session, I'm going to be talking about how to create XNA games for Windows phones using Cheezia, a game that we developed, as a case study. Since this is going to be a very short and rather high-level presentation, we're actually going to be giving away almost the full source code for free, and you can basically just download it from attido.com/TechDays. You can actually do it right now if you want. And this is going to be a quite tight session, so we might not actually have time for questions by the end of it. But I'm going to be at Attido's stand from 2 to 3:30. And you can just go there and ask me some questions, and you can even take a look at the code, and we'll have plenty of time. Moving on, this is today's agenda, so we have a whole lot of ground to cover, so let's get to it. And the first thing I actually want to do is show you what Cheezia is. I have it running on the emulator here. It's actually what you're going to get when you download it from TechDays, attido.com/TechDays website. And this is Cheezia, which is a puzzle reaction game. And the main goal of it is to pack these cheeses into packages that are going to match these distribution containers here that slide through this conveyor belt. And you do this by rotating the mouse wheels. Once you get it packed, you get some score. And if you get it wrongly, it's destroyed and your rate goes down faster. And it has some other items. It's quite a neat game. And not only that, it has trophies or achievements that players can collect throughout the game. And it has some statistics of the game and lots of different scores. And that's the game. Now we're going to have to see how that was made. First, it was developed in Flash for iOS and Android devices using Adobe Air. And the Windows Phone version was created using XNA, which is the topic of this presentation, and C# as the main language. This Windows Phone version, it has been downloaded over 54,000 times, and it also featured in Microsoft Channel 9's Hot Apps segment. And like I said before, you can find the full source code at attido.com/TechDays. So why not just download it and see it for yourself, the implementation details. Now, a bit of XNA. XNA is a game framework that enables you to create 2D and 3D games for Windows phones, Xbox 360, and Windows PC. And one of the great advantages of this platform is that once you have the game or all the code ready for one of the platforms, it's really easy to port it to the other ones because you can reuse most of the code. Basically, you just need to take care of the resolution, because obviously they use different resolutions. Also the input type, for example, if you're using a keypad or gamepad or a keyboard. And also how to handle tombstoning. That's basically just for Windows Phone. Now, imagine that you have a good idea for a game. The first thing you're going to do is create a game project in Visual Studio. And what Visual Studio does is that it creates a solution for you comprised of 2 projects. The first one down here is the content project. And in this content project, that's where you're going to put all of your game assets. For example, your sprites, your textures, your models, your sound effects, all of the fonts. And XNA provides a content pipeline, which is responsible for compiling all of those resources into binary files of format XML, which is going to be loaded by the runtime in your device. Now, the next project, the game project, is comprised basically of this file here, the game1.cs, which inherits from game, the main XNA game class. And this class, it gives you a set of methods which are basically the game loop model that you have to use. And the game loop starts from the initialize method, That's where you're going to initialize all of your game variables. Then it comes to the load content method. In that method, you're going to load all of your content, obviously. So you're going to use the content manager.load method. And then the game class, it starts an infinite loop between the update and draw method. And it's going to gain this loop until the player tells or signals that he wants to stop playing, he wants to quit. And that's when the unload content is going to run automatically. And you should just free up all the resources. Now, it says over there that XNA uses the polling loop model instead of the event-driven model. That means that you have to poll for information. There are no events being triggered for you. A good example is when you have input and there's new input available for you. You're not going to get an event saying, okay, the player clicked the back button. You actually have in every update tick know that, okay, did he click, did he click? You have to poll for that information. And that's actually basically it. With this, you can create your game. But then again, if you're actually making something really cool with multiple screens, like you saw Cheezia, which is a really cool game, you're going to need some sort of structure in order to maintain all of the states between those multiple screens and know which one is deactivated, which one's on top. And for that, the game state management classes come in really handy. These classes, they're provided by Microsoft through AppHub, and you can also find it in the Cheezia code. And it's comprised of a few classes that are basically helper classes for you. The first one is the screen manager, which inherits from drawable game component. Because of that, it knows when it's going to be updated and drawn. And like the name says, it's responsible for managing one or many game screens that you have in your game. Since it knows how to be updated and drawn, it basically just calls all of the update and draw methods of the screens, and it routes the input to the topmost active screen. And it's also responsible for the activation and deactivation of each game screen in case of tombstoning and coming back from it. The game screen is the abstract class that represents a game or a screen in your game. And basically you're just going to have to inherit from this class and override these methods. The first one, the activate method. That's where you're going to load all of your content using the content manager that we saw one slide ago. In this method, something that's advisable is to have one instance of content manager per game screen. And the reason for that is so that you're able to load and unload content whenever you enter or leave the screen. Otherwise, everything is going to be loaded up in your memory, and you're basically just going to explode it. So the game's going to crash at some point. This method also gives you a boolean that says whether the instance was preserved or not. This is due to the fast step switch feature of many devices. And with that, you know whether you should reload all of your instances, all of your content or not, or if they're already in memory. And in the deactivated method, for example, that's where you would save all of your important game variables into the phone application state or phone application service state dictionary, just so that when you come back from tombstoning, everything is still going to be there. Another class is called input state, and that's responsible for reading the input from the gamepad or the keyboard or the touch panel. The input action is the class that's responsible for evaluating which buttons and keys have been pressed. And there's also an interface, the ice cream factory, which needs to be implemented so that the screen manager knows how to recreate all of your game screens. And like in Cheezia, if your game screens, they have default constructors, it's basically just a one-liner. You just need to call the activator.create instance, passing the instance type. Then the screen manager knows how to recreate them. Now, when it comes to input handling, the screen manager is responsible for refreshing the input state in every update tick. And it's also responsible for calling the handle input method only for the topmost active screen. So you actually don't need to worry about it anymore. All you have to do is just implement this method, which In this case, it receives an input state as a parameter, and it has a few properties. Two that you're basically going to use are the gestures, which contains a list of gesture samples, and it basically tells information regarding, for example, the delta of a drag or the position of a point. And the touch state, it contains a collection of touch locations. This is going to be quite useful when you're, in this case for Cheezia, you're using multiple touch. But even though we're making a game for a phone, we're still going to need to call the inputAction.evaluate method in order to know whether the back button was clicked or not. And the marketplace has 4 important rules regarding this button that you should be aware of. The first one is if the player's in the gameplay screen, you're going to have to go to the pause state. If he's already in the pause state, you just resume the game. If you're in any other screens other than the main menu, you just go back to the parent. And if you're in the main menu, you exit the game. But you can not only use the touch panel for input, you can also use the accelerometer, which is event-driven because it uses the same interface as Silverlight. And in order to do that, you just need to bind to the reading changed event and call the start method. It's really simple. But there is a small detail regarding the accelerometer, which is if you're using only that in your game, the screen might actually lock. It's liable for being locked. And in this case, you could actually set the property is screensaver enabled to false from the game guide class. The guide class, it also gives you support when it comes to getting more input from the user. It just gives you the virtual keyboard. So you can also use that if you need it. Now, the update method, that's quite straightforward. That's basically where you're going to update all of your game variables. Your speed, your acceleration, the position of your player, the score, timer. That's also where you're going to switch to the next frame of the sprite sheet of your animation, just so that you give the players the illusion that your characters are alive. And for that, it's very, very advisable to use the game time class, just so that you know how long it's been in between frame updates, because you don't want to make your character go really fast when changing the frames. When it comes to the draw method, the first thing you're going to do is clear the buffer, because for every update, you're going to recreate the frame. So when you clear the back buffer, you're going to call the sprite batch begin, and then a series of draw and drawString methods to draw your textures and your strings, for example, the timer or the score. And after that, you just call the sprite batch.end method. And remember that the order matters. So when you're drawing, things are drawn on top of each other. So make sure that you're not going to draw something really important first and it's going to be overdrawn by maybe the background. So nobody's going to see that. Also, if you want to achieve, for example, transparency when drawing, there are 2 basic ways. The first one, you can just use a PNG image with transparency, or you can use the old school color key property. And the default transparent color is magenta, but you can use any color if you want. You can just change the pattern here. If you don't know, magenta is this bright thing here. When it comes to fonts, drawing fonts, you can use any type of system font that's available out there. You can even use your own TTF, which in this case it needs to be installed in your dev machine. And the content pipeline is just going to compile it into XMP, and you don't have to have it installed in your phone. Or you can even draw in a bitmap file your alphabet, just like this. Now, let's load some sounds in our game. Sound effects, they're loaded by the content manager just like any other type of content item. So basically you just need to call content manager.load, passing the sound effect as a generic type, and there you have it, you have a sound effect. And when you have the sound effect, if you call the create instance method, you're going to have a sound effect instance object. And the basic difference between these two is that when you have a sound effect and you call it play method, it's just going to play the sound until the end. You don't have any more control over it. But if you have the sound effect instance, you do have more control over your sound. So you can change the volume, the pitch, the pan. So maybe if the player, the actual character is a bit more to the right, you can put the sound to go a bit more for the right. Just an idea. It also gives you some playback capabilities. So you can pause and resume, for example, the music or the background music. And XNA supports all types of audio files, or at least the most common ones. Now, this is something that is optional, but XNA provides this feature for you, and we did use it in Cheezia, in which you can use some XML files just to configure some data, and these XML files are going to be treated as regular resources, just like your textures, your sound effects. And we used it in Cheezia to create the level design and to have some achievement-related data. And basically, I'm going to use the mouse now. In the XML file, you're going to have this XNA content root element, and you're going to have the asset element where you're going to say which type is going to be the most important class of this XML, which in this case is the load configuration. And if you have arrays, you're going to have to use this item element here. Other than that, it's quite easy to read. And the corresponding classes of this XML, they have to be implemented in a separate game project, game library project, which here we call Cheezia data. And we have the levels and the trophies. But once you have those two prerequisites done, you basically just need to call the content-manage.load method, in our case, passing level configuration as the type, and everything's going to be automatically parsed for you. So that's really handy. But now that we're actually making a game for a phone, we know that it's subject to various types of interruptions. For example, you can receive a phone call or an SMS message, or the player might say, hey, I want to pause for a little while. And what he expects is that when he's ready to play, the game should not have continued without him. It should have been maintained the way it was before. And in order to do that, you do it just like any other Silverlight application. You just bind to the launching, activated, deactivated, and closing methods, and you read and write data as necessary. And you should use the Screen Manager class, the activated and deactivated methods that it provides, in order to be able to read and write all of those data. And just remember that if you have persistent data, it's not advisable, it's required to use the isolated storage. Now, the last thing you need to do before submitting your game for submission to the marketplace is configuring some metadata files, namely the app manifest and the WN app manifest. And these are just some simple attributes that you need to fill, for example, the title, the description, the author. Something that's really important is the genre attribute, which you have to use the apps.games value, just so that your game is going to become part of the Games Hub. Otherwise, it's going to be treated as a regular application. But now, once you have a game with multiple screens, your input, you're handling input, you're updating and drawing everything in every tick. You have sound effects. You have the metadata files configured. You're handling tombstoning. It's pretty much ready. So you can just submit it for certification. And if it passes, it's going to reach the marketplace. If you want to find some more information, you can just go to AppHub, especially in the education page. It has lots of samples and articles, so really good source of information. And also the MSDN library. And that's basically it. This was a very short, high-level presentation on how to create XNA games for Windows phones. And we have 13 seconds left, so I will be in Attido's stand from 2 to 3:30, so you can just ask more questions there. And Also remember to download the code from attido.com/techdays. That's going to be really useful for your studies, and you can use part of the code to actually make your own games. It's quite nice. Thank you.